Today, we will introduce several Supreme Court justices who deeply shaped the structure of the American constitutional system. This episode is designed to help with English listening practice, while also offering meaningful historical insight. Supreme Court Justices and U.S. Constitutional History. If we think of the American constitutional system as a machine that has been running for a long time, then the Supreme Court is not a passive part inside it. It is a core component that constantly adjusts direction and redraws boundaries. The Constitution itself is very short and highly abstract. What truly decides what the Constitution means in real life is not the text alone, but the work of a small number of Supreme Court justices who left deep marks at key moments in history. These justices lived in different eras and held very different views, but together they achieved one thing. They turned an 18th-century political document into a system that could keep working for more than 200 years. Among all of them, the most foundational figure is John Marshall. Before he became Chief Justice, the Supreme Court had little real influence. Congress and the President dominated politics, while the court looked more like a technical body handling minor disputes. Marshall faced a constitution that was intentionally vague and avoided clear answers on many key questions. What he did was not simply explain specific clauses. Instead, he defined the position of the court itself. In Marbury v. Madison, he formally denied the court's power to directly enforce an executive order, but at the same time established the principle of judicial review, the idea that courts can decide whether laws passed by Congress are constitutional. This move was extremely skillful. It avoided direct conflict while placing the court at the top of the constitutional system. After that, through a series of cases involving federal power, state authority, commerce, and contracts, Marshall consistently pushed one direction. The United States was not a loose alliance of states, but a unified nation built around the Constitution. During his time, the Supreme Court became the central axis of the constitutional structure. By the late 19th century, American society had changed dramatically. Industrialization, urban growth, and the rise of large corporations created new constitutional problems. Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. did not reshape the system the way Marshall did. Instead, he changed how judges thought about the Constitution. Holmes strongly opposed treating the Constitution as a perfect logical system. He believed that law comes from experience, not abstract reasoning. This approach shifted constitutional interpretation away from pure logic and toward real-world consequences and historical context. In cases about free speech, he introduced the idea of clear and present danger. At the time, this standard was still limited, but it gave later courts a way to expand protection for speech. Holmes did not leave behind fixed answers. What he left was a method of thinking. The Constitution must be understood through real conflicts, not treated as a sacred theory. Working alongside Holmes was Louis Brandeis. If Holmes brought the Constitution closer to reality, Brandeis brought modern society directly into constitutional law. His main concern was the tension between large corporations, financial power, and democracy. He believed that if the Constitution ignored the concentration of power, freedom would become a privilege only for the strong. From this thinking, he developed the idea of a constitutional right to privacy, which later became the foundation for many rights not explicitly written in the Constitution. Brandeis was also famous for the Brandeis Brief, in which he used data from economics, sociology, and statistics in court arguments. This approach changed how the Supreme Court worked and forced it to confront the complexity of modern society. In the mid-20th century, the American constitutional system entered a period of intense activity. At the center of this period stood Earl Warren. Warren was not a traditional legal scholar, but he had strong political judgment. Under his leadership, the Supreme Court moved to the front lines of social conflict. In cases involving racial segregation, criminal justice, and voting rights, the court no longer acted only as a neutral referee. It actively corrected long-standing structural injustices. Brown v. Board of Education did more than end legal segregation in schools. It announced that the constitutional principle of equality was stronger than local political compromise. During the Warren Court era, the Supreme Court became widely seen as a driver of social change. This also brought intense political resistance, regardless of how one judges it. This period established a clear fact. The Supreme Court could reshape how the nation functions when it chose to do so. After Warren, William J. Brennan Jr. became the most consistent and influential supporter of expanding individual rights. Brennan was not known for dramatic language, but across many decisions he repeatedly emphasized that the Constitution's core purpose is to protect individuals from the power of the majority. In cases involving free speech, due process, and minority rights, he promoted a strongly protective view of the Constitution, one that treated government power with constant suspicion. With his influence, the Supreme Court developed a detailed system of rights protection that deeply shaped modern American liberal constitutional thought. Standing in clear tension with this tradition was Antonin Scalia. Scalia's importance does not come from how many cases he won, but from how he changed the rules of constitutional debate. He strongly rejected the idea of a living constitution. He argued that constitutional meaning should be based on the text and the public understanding at the time it was written. In his view, judges should not create new rules under the name of interpretation. Through sharp dissents and clear arguments, he pushed originalism into the mainstream. After Scalia, debates about the Constitution could no longer avoid the question of interpretive method itself. Even those who disagreed with him had to respond on his terms. Looking back at this history, one thing becomes clear. The American constitutional system was not designed once and for all by a single generation. It was built through long-term tension and debate among justices with very different views. Marshall defined the court's position. Holmes and Brandeis transformed methods of interpretation. Warren and Brennan expanded the boundaries of rights. Scalia tried to set limits on that expansion. Together, these conflicting efforts created the internal balance that allows the American constitutional system to keep working. The importance of the Supreme Court does not lie in always being right, but in standing at the center of the system's ongoing self-correction.